All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Frequency of Fatherhood Summit. Today, I get the pleasure of introducing Spencer Russell. Some of you know him as Toddlers Can Read. Today, we're going to dive into high expectations with yourself and with your kids. Spencer's a global leader in literacy innovation and the founder of Toddlers Can Read. It's a groundbreaking program that has helped thousands of children master the art of reading. Spencer is widely recognized as an outstanding educator who has received widespread acclaim for his contribution to the teaching profession, winning various teaching awards within his city, state, and national charter network. After successfully teaching his 2-year-old son how to read, Spencer left his position at a teaching lab and an educational nonprofit specializing in curriculum-specific professional development for teachers to pour all of his expertise, research, and resources into Toddlers Can Read. I could go on and on. The list is long. The accolades could fill up pages and pages, but let's just get to it. Spencer, thank you so much for coming.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
And no worries. Spencer, as I ask many people, there's always the why. What drove you to this work? What really pushed you into this role?
Yeah, I started my career as a teacher. I taught kindergarten and first grade, so I'm used to working with young children. And in that time, I found my passion, which is working with kids. It's not so much the academics, the reading, the math, or whatever else, just being with kids, helping them, coaching them, pushing them to be the best versions of themselves. Like, that's what I love, and that's my passion. And I did that work for 6 years. I thought it was what I was going to do my whole life. But when my wife got pregnant, I had a decision to make. Am I going to keep teaching and try and teach at this same level? Or am I going to transition into something I can do and have a little bit more time as a dad to be with my son, to be at his doctor's appointments, his events, be a little bit more hands-on in his life? And so despite the fact that I wanted to keep kind of working with kids in that capacity, I decided that my son was going to need my full attention. And so I transitioned into a role with an educational nonprofit that I could do from home, have more time, more flexibility, higher income to support my family. Did that for a number of years, but ultimately knew it wasn't my passion. It wasn't the final landing spot. It was what I did when my son was really little in order to support. But that whole time I was kind of thinking, what's the next step? What's the next step? And it just so happened I've been teaching him to read at the same time. So by 2.5, 3, he's reading, then he's reading well, then he's reading really well. And I realized I was kind of onto something, and that I could kind of bridge this work I've been doing at home with my son with this kind of desire to have a new job, a new career, a new calling that was a little bit more directly working with kids and working with families, which is where my passion was. So I put those things together, started Toddlers Can Read in 2021. And since then, have been supporting lots and lots and lots of kids and families and learning how to read.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's beautiful because, we were talking before we started recording, and I was telling you that I wholeheartedly believe that we have fathers out there that want to be better fathers, right? We have fathers that want to show up, that want to be present, and they just don't know how, right? They don't know how either because their father wasn't present. They haven't seen it. We emulate the most masculine relationship we experienced growing up. And so for us, it comes back to being able to have curiosity around our children being our teachers, right? You said something along the lines of, in the forum that we were going back and forth with, was that when we're triggered by something, maybe it's something our children does, it's something that we have to look at ourselves, right? Maybe we don't have a barrier or a boundary set, an expectation for ourselves. Maybe we have low expectations. Can you talk a little bit more about that and your thoughts on that? Because I think that's amazing in building connection with our kids.
For sure. Something I had to realize as a teacher was when I saw behaviors in my classroom from my kids, it was a reflection of me, not of them. And if we can get parents, if we can get fathers to understand that sole truth, we would see a lot of transformation in the way that people approach their relationships with their kids. As soon as you realize this is something I can control, this is something I can do, this is something I can change about myself and my approach and my skill level in order to impact my kid, all of a sudden we start seeing them through a different lens. And it's no longer my kid is the problem, my kid is so annoying, my kid wants this and that, but it's I need to adjust something and I can help my kid become this best version of themselves that they deserve to be. And so I think for me personally, I went through this conflict when I was 22, 23 with a bunch of other people's kids, and I learned this and kind of had this skill and had this mindset going into parenting. So when we had my son, and during periods where the behavior wasn't where we wanted it to be, or there were other things, my wife and I were able to look at each other and say, okay, what are we doing? It's it's either me, it's you, or it's both of us. But this little kid's behavior is not random. So do we need to be more consistent? Do we need to adjust bedtime? Do we need to change the schedule? Do we need to change the tone that we're giving feedback on? Is it too loose or is it too strict, right? It's all these little questions and adjustments to try and figure out how to deal with him and how to help support him. But many folks either never have that realization ever. I mean, I think my dad is having this realization now, like in his 60s, kind of looking back on how he was as a parent. They either never have it or they have it kind of late after a lot of the behavior has developed, after a lot of the blame has been given to the kid. And that's tough. So if folks are listening, struggling with behavior, struggling with different aspects, I know it can sound cold or callous, or it sounds like I don't get it. I mean, I have worked with the worst behaviors. I have seen it all from 28 kids at the same time. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that when we see kids doing something, there's always something that we can do in order to help the kid, help the situation, and build the skills that they need to be successful.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful because I think that when I think about creating, I use this term a lot, like taking responsibility for our lives, right? And honing into fatherhood more specific. You mentioned about fathers being less involved, that there's less responsibility, the expectation is on other people. But when we take full ownership, when we take full responsibility, we're being encountered by our own triggers, right? And so I firmly believe, just like reading is a skill, in playing sports, I love sports. I'm a sports coach by trade. All of these things can be developed within us. And so my next question here is what ways can fathers build the necessary skill to raise happy, healthy, and confident children?
That's a huge question. And I wish it were a simple answer. I'll start with an approach that I find helpful. And I think from the approach, we'll see kind of how challenging this is. It's doable, but the approach that I take to, let's just call it behavior. Maybe the kid's always doing something that pisses you off, or they're always acting up in this situation, or you just don't have the patience to deal with XYZ, right? You've got something in front of you. If you look at the symptom, you look at the outcome, you're like, okay, my kid is slamming the chair. They're slamming the chair. Why are they slamming the chair? You're going to deal with slamming the chair. You're going to give some kind of consequence or yell or do something related to slamming the chair, but slamming the chair isn't the issue. The issue is something else. There are a million reasons why kids get physical. If we just look at the outcomes, there's a million reasons why that happens. But if we don't understand the root cause, then we don't know what skill to build in order to support our kid. And the analogy I like to use here is a doctor. And if you go to a doctor's office and you say, okay, doc, I've got a cough. Well, the doctor's not going to say, okay, here's how you treat a cough. You do X, Y, Z. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions to try and get through the cause. They're going to say, okay, how long has it lasted? Is it seasonal or is it not? Is it dry? Is it wet? Do you still have your sense of taste and smell or not, right? Because we're going to treat a cough different if it's allergies versus flu versus COVID versus anything else, right? A good doctor is going to walk through a checklist to try and diagnose what the actual issue is. I think as dads, our job is to look at that behavior and take a reasonable guess about what's going on. We ask ourselves some questions. Okay, is it only with me or is it with me and mom? Because that's going to give you a lot of information right there. Is it only after this thing happens? Is it only when they're told no? Or is it all these other times? And we try and kind of peel back the layers to figure out what's going on. Maybe your kid's issue, that's slamming the chair, maybe it's their inability to accept no. And if that's the case, then the skill you need to build as a father is being able to diagnose issues in your kids. That is a skill to be able to look at a child and understand what's going on. And the skill you need to build in your child is the ability to accept no. So you would start thinking about your day mapping it out and say, okay, we need to start putting some easy no's in this day. We need to get our kid through 3 no's today in low stakes situations. And tomorrow we're going to give a little higher stakes no's. And the next day, and it sounds super scientific, right? But like, it's not that complicated. Your kid can't accept no, practice accepting no. Plan for what you're going to say when they don't accept no. And then don't get so frustrated when they throw the chair, because the chair is not the issue. That no is the issue, right? Like anything else your kid can't do, that's how they're going to respond. Take that same chair situation, and maybe it's not like I can't accept no, maybe it's your expectations are different than your wife's. And maybe you figure that out because they never slam it with your wife, they always slam it with you. So the solution is we need to have a conversation with our wife, figure out what the consistent expectation is, communicate that to the kid. So approach, philosophy, I know I'm kind of saying a lot, but it's this idea of we've got to get to the root cause of what's happening with our kid. Once we get to that root cause, there's always an action for us to do, a skill for us to build, something we can improve. And then there's always something that we then do for our kid, a way to coach them up or build them up or help push them through that situation.
Yeah, I love that. You just stole the words out of my mouth on my next question, but like it really requires this intentionality with fathers, right? We really have to start to communicate more with our spouse if we're not already doing so. We have to be involved and present with our kids. And something that you talked about is these small tasks, but these small tasks are building momentum. It's creating confidence, it's creating trust. And something that we're here talking about today is high expectations, right? Not just of self, but with our kids. How do we cultivate trust and self-confidence within our kids so we can continually I don't want to use the word always have high expectations, but we have a standard. We're setting a standard. How can we build that trust and self-confidence?
I think the word that you use of intentionality to me is everything. We can't gain our kids' trust. We can't build their confidence. We can't have high expectations of them if we're not intentional about who we want them to become. If we don't have a clear image in our head of who we want our child to grow into, we're leaving their growth, their success up to chance. So for me, we have that expectation set high. It's set in a place that they can attain. And we have little marks along the way that we are reinforcing, saying, you're doing a great job, you're making progress, keep it up. And we have like very specific behavior. So let's say like you want high expectations for how your kid treats other people. You want them to say thank you and to say please, or you want them to hold the door for people. Or on like a more concrete level, you want them to check in on people when they're hurt, or to ask questions when someone's feeling sad. You want them to have that kind of empathy. Whatever that thing is, you've got to know it in advance. And once you know, here's what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like for them to meet those expectations, there's times all day long where you can build towards it. On, the smallest level, it's remember, say this. Some folks don't like that. Some folks think that's like micromanaging with kids, but if you don't tell the kid to do it, they're not going to do it, right? There's times where we model that ourselves. So we make sure that we are saying those things, doing those things for a kid to look up to. And then we're calling out and we're shouting out and we're encouraging, hey, I noticed when you did this situation, you turned around and you told that person thank you and it made them smile. Way to go. That's really living this value of being a kind, considerate person. And as soon as we set that bar of expectation, we get really clear about it, we're going to find a million ways that we can build it. And that consistency is going to build the trust, right? Because our kid's going to know and understand, okay, daddy's looking for this. Daddy said this is important. Daddy talks to me about this every day, and daddy follows through. He notices when I do it, and when I don't do it, that builds trust. We break trust with kids when we're inconsistent. When we say, you've got to be nice, and then we don't model nice. We say that you've got to be nice, and then they do it, and we don't recognize it. That's what breaks trust. We can break trust by setting that expectation too high too, and say, you know what? I expect you to be perfect all day, every second, and our kid just can't hit that. But if we're intentional with what the goal is, and we're building them towards that throughout the day, throughout the weeks, throughout the months, throughout the years, then that's going to build trust, and it's going to build the confidence in our kid that they can do this because my daddy's supporting me, my daddy's seeing me, my daddy's building the skill, and they're helping me to do it.
Yeah, and that process that you just mentioned, how can we give the children ownership in a feasible way? Like I'm a firm believer that, like, especially with connection, right? And I'm sure you've had a robust experience with different kids. Like when we're building connection, there's a shared ownership. Obviously, we're guiding, but we have to give them this ability to. It goes from a framework from Dewey Freeman. A powerful relationship is a relationship that has the ability to influence and be influenced. And so where
Mhm.
I'm going with this is, where is the ownership for the kids? Where can we allow our kids to influence us in that process?
Wonderful. I think there's a lot of space for really intentional questions. And if you get in the habit of asking good questions, then you can kind of plant that question in your kid's head as a question that they start to think through and process the situation. Meaning, for example, when I taught first grade, I was trying to build critical thinking skills. And critical thinking skills are something that, like, at the beginning, I can kind of coach you through and I can explain what critical thinking is. I can model it. I can tell you to do it. I can shout you out when you do it. But eventually, you've got to be doing the thinking on your own and you've got to be pushing the conversation, and I'm responding to you. So, what we do is we build the skills, we call it, we do that stuff, but then ask questions. I said, okay, let's look at the news today. What do we see? What does this mean? Like, what are they saying about people who look like us? What are they saying? How does this impact us in our day-to-day lives? When we went through the hallway, instead of saying, okay, stand in line, do this, do that, I said, okay, there's other classes learning. What would be a smart way to move right now? And it may be the way the school said, it might be different. We did a lot of things differently because we started with the questions. And then as we go through the school year, my kids start to ask the questions and they start to say, okay, what would be a good way to do this lesson right now? Oh, we can do the same lesson outside. It's a nice day and feels good and we'll still be focused. So we can go outside and we can do this math lesson there. And that's not me saying it and me saying, okay, let's do this. That's my kids constantly asking them questions, putting that voice in their head, saying, how can we reassess this situation and make it better? So I think that would apply to fatherhood because there's times when, yes, we're correcting our child or we're telling them what to say or encouraging them what to do. But if we have a vision of who we want them to become and some skill we want them to have, if we can have them asking the right questions and encourage them to think about things themselves, not rely on us to tell them, but to ask the right questions and think about it on their own, then I think that pushes them to a space of generation, right? And in that same, be nice example, we can have our kid thinking through, okay, what would it mean to be nice in this situation? What would it mean for my daddy to be nice in this situation? What does it mean that we should be doing? How should we be thinking about this? How should we be treating people, right? And then there's this kind of give and pull.
Yeah, I love that. Like that's one thing that there's a framework out there called conscious leadership, and it talks about having a curious mindset, right? A lifelong learning, curious mindset. Everything is meant for you, right? Everything that happens in your life meant for you. I want to go to a different spectrum here because we're talking about high expectations, and part of that is our own expectations of ourselves as fathers, right?
Yep.
And one thing that I've noticed in the men that I work with, and I'm not sure if you've seen this in your area, but like fathers, like we're so outwardly focused, right? We got to financially provide. We're worried about everything that's going on in life that sometimes we don't really lean inward into ourselves and take care of ourselves, right? Servant leaders should serve themselves first, in my opinion. How can low expectations from fathers, their own low expectations of themselves, impact a child's self-esteem and confidence?
First, I think your expectations of yourself are very telling. So if you've got the bar set low for yourself, it's going to be hard for that bar to be set high for people around you. And if it's set high for people around you, whether a child or not, they can see through it. Whether it's your kid, whether it's your wife, whether it's significant other, someone else in your life. If you are not living according to your potential, you're not taking care of yourself, you're not doing what you need to do day in and day out, it's impossible to expect other people to be doing more than you're doing for yourself. So you're either not going to expect that, in my opinion, you're going to hold everyone to that low expectation that you have, or you are going to expect it and people are going to call bullshit because they can see that you're not living it in your life, right? I think the low expectations for ourselves is also problematic because it's going to impact our energy our mood, our decision making, like all these other things that we need to be super sharp and productive. Like times in my life where I'm not like firing on all cylinders, I'm not eating well, I'm not working out, I'm not running, I'm not stretching, I'm not getting my sleep, like doing all the things I need to do to take care of myself, right? If I allow myself to slip on those things, then you know what, it's fine. I'll just blah blah blah. Like I am not as good at work. I'm not as good in my relationship. I'm not as good as a dad. I've got to hold myself to a high bar mentally and physically to have the energy necessary to do the work. Because I truly believe fatherhood, being a parent, is one of the hardest and most challenging jobs that you will ever do if you see it clearly. If you see it as just, spend time with my kids, put them on a screen, whatever, like it's a pretty easy job. But if you see the potential of your kid and what it takes to get them to the level that you want to get them to, like you've got to be sharp and you've got to be ready to go and you've got to have expectations for yourself that are high as hell in order to hold your kid to those same expectations.
Yeah, you said a little bit of that already, and I want to dive into it more. But like talking about this connection and raising the standard, what are some ways that fathers can be more involved? Right, they can take more responsibility. They can raise their own internal expectations, but at the same time, create higher expectations for their children's behavior and potential.
I'll give a concrete example that I think would help a lot of dads who are looking for ways to get more involved with their kids. If you can pick one domain to support your child, maybe that's reading. So I help people teach their kids how to read. Maybe it's math or maybe it's some other academic skill. It could be a sport. It could be soccer or basketball. It could be a language. It could be an activity like chess, right? It doesn't matter the thing. If you can pick one bite-sized topic to teach your kid and you can commit to a schedule and build a routine and say, okay, every day for this amount of minutes, we're going to do this. This is the location we're going to do it in. This is the thing that we're driving towards. And this is the curriculum. This is the path that I'm going to take them through. And you start to see that progress with the kid towards helping them to accomplish and achieve something significant, something that's actually going to impact their life. We're not picking random stuff, right? We're not going to just do chess because we're going to pick stuff that's important to us or that's important to our kid or that's going to be a helpful skill for them. And you can take 5 or 10 minutes a day to build towards a meaningful goal and hit the goal. I think that's going to give you so much momentum to take on other things. The number of parents I've worked with who in 5 minutes a day have taught their kid to read and then come back to me and say, okay, now we're doing this. Now I'm teaching this. Or come back to me and say, I realize I can actually do it. That's a huge confidence boost. So I see a lot of dads who have less time with the kid than mom. And during that time, or maybe trying to do all the stuff they want to do to kind of catch up for the day, or during that time are kind of lost with how to spend it. You don't have to do everything that mom did or everything that your wife did or do everything for the course of the day. If you can pick one thing and teach that thing really well, that is your father-son, father-daughter thing. And they're making meaningful impact. Man, I mean, that's going to change so much for their skill, their confidence, your relationship, your confidence. And I don't think that you can tell me a dad who's not going to take those couple minutes a day, see the progress, and then not want to keep going, not want to take on a second thing, not want to get a little bit more involved. I think that we've got to see wins. We've got to have goals. We have to have something to reach towards and something tangible rather than, I've just got 15 minutes. So let me be the fun dad. Let me just, let's just roll around for a little bit. Like we need all that stuff too. But setting an achievement goal with your kid, I think is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, I love what you said there. It kind of takes me to my own journey. I mentioned before that my kids, we homeschool form called unschooling, and one of the things that we do is we set goals of what they want to learn for the day, and within that ownership, it creates a shared connection, right? A shared bond. And I think many fathers out there, what you just said gives them a path forward, whatever it may be. Could be chess, could be reading, whatever the case may be. I want to ask you, like within your work of toddlers can read and your journey within fatherhood, how has that helped you within your journey of fatherhood, either connection or whatever aspect?
It's been incredibly important for me. We started with reading, and it was almost every day for a year, a little over a year, almost every day. We probably did 300 and 20 or 330 days out of like 360. I mean, we were really working. And in that time, it's like a microcosm of an entire like relationship. There's times when you're pushing and challenging because the effort isn't there, and there's times when you're rewarding and congratulating because the effort is there. There's times when like they're knocking out the park and you're just like so happy, and there's times where you get frustrated. Like everything happens in that time, but you're kind of growing and learning and working through it together. And your kid is seeing that you are the constant through that situation. If you handle it skillfully, your kid is building trust in you. They're building confidence in themselves, and you're building trust and confidence in you and in your kid. So there's so much that's in that has helped me with him. And now the thing is baseball, because I've really latched on to this idea that there's got to be something. Like I need a daddy's son project to be working on, because my job is intense. I'm working a lot. I'm on a lot. I'm in front of a lot of people. There's a lot of responsibility, with like being on Instagram. And so when I'm with my son, I need a task sometimes to be able to turn off. This is daddy's work mode, and this is daddy trying to make money, to like, this is daddy spending time with you, and let's do an activity together. And so baseball right now, we do like 20 minutes a night, and we have a set number of times he has to catch it and throw it and hit it, and he loves it. And part of the reason he loves it is because I did this reading journey with him. I knew how he responded. I knew how to work with him one-on-one. I knew how much to push versus how much to encourage. And now I'm applying all that same stuff to baseball. And we're taking something that he's really not good at. I mean, like pretty bad at this. He's not going to hear this interview, so I feel comfortable saying this. He's not good at it, but that's exactly why we're practicing it. We're building his confidence. We're building his self-esteem. We're building his ability to see, I'm not good at this today, but I'm a little bit better than yesterday. I'm a little bit better than yesterday. So to me, that's just so important. And it's never baseball. It's never reading. It's never this thing. It's all the other stuff that's wrapped up in working one-on-one with your kid in that capacity.
Yeah, I really love that. And I was smiling there because it just brings joy being a football and a basketball coach. I know the process. I've worked with many kids, and at the end of the day, when we unravel all of this, like fatherhood, there's so many challenges of it. We're fortunate that they're not born a teenager, right? We grow with them, and part of growing is learning more about yourself. Men that are watching this, men that are like, you connect with kids on a deeper level, you know how to do it all. Please help me. How can men build a deeper connection with their children through all of everything that we just said?
It's a wonderful question. It's another one that I think is tricky, because I would go back to this idea of like, why don't you have that connection now? Like, what is the root cause of that? Is it some insecurity that you have from your childhood? Something that you need to legitimately work through? Hire someone, talk to someone, do something to actually work through and understand maybe you didn't have that connection with your own father, or was never modeled, or maybe someone harmed you, and so you're afraid of getting close. Like that does happen. We like talk about it in psychology. Like it's always someone else. Like that's a lot of us. A lot of us grow up with that. And so that could be the thing that we need to work through. It could be because you don't have that kind of meaningful task and goal in front of you. Like fatherhood is this kind of vague, ambiguous thing. Every day feels the same. We wake up and do the same shit with our kid. Well, if you start to block 5 or 10 minutes a day where there's a goal, I think a lot of men are driven by that and feel, okay, I've got to accomplish this thing with my kid. We're working on this together. We're accomplishing something together. And just like you think about being on a sports team with someone, I ran track and played soccer, and I had a deep connection with my teammates. You feel connected when you're working with someone in the same direction. My son and I grew our connection through reading, and now we're growing it through baseball, right? There is a shared thing that builds connection. So maybe it's just having that goal in front of you. Maybe there's some kind of like family dynamic between you and other kids and your partner, where the expectations are different and inconsistent, and just the parenting across the board is making it so that the behaviors are kind of messy, which is making it hard to connect with them, because it is tough. As a teacher, it was tough to connect with my kids when I didn't understand the behavior. The behavior was challenging, so I was tired and I was stressed. And because I was tired and stressed, it made the behavior more challenging, right? Maybe we're in that cycle where we need to build a little bit more skill in how we deal with our kids, or skill with how we build a relationship with our partner in order to build that connection. But I would come back to that kind of foundational idea of there's always something, but I can't give like a blanket statement, like a, just do this to build connection, because that might not be the issue. The issue might be much deeper, or it might be much more simple. And I've had students who I didn't have the connect with initially. Some of them I needed more sleep. Real talk is like, I need to sleep more. I need my coffee a little bit earlier. And when they come in the classroom, I need some calm music on. That's going to put me in the right headspace. Me and him, we're good now. Some kids, I needed to visit their home. I needed to get on the same page with their parent and say, okay, this was happening in school. What's happening at home? Are we on the same page here? Okay, here's what we're both going to do moving forward with this kid. And other kids, it was just the behavior management. Like I didn't know what I was doing. And I needed to build in some strategies for what happens when a kid is calling out, what happens when a kid runs out of the room, or how I respond to this, or throwing chairs, right? And once I got good at those things, I can look at a kid and say, okay, my relationship with this kid needs to be stronger. What do I think I need to do? What's the root cause? And if I can get at that, I can figure out how to respond. And, if folks are listening and don't have that connection, I don't want it to seem overwhelming, right? This should be good news. It means that you don't have to do everything. You've got to take your best guess, literally take a guess. Say, here's what I think it is. I think it's because I'm missing this. Fix that thing for a week and see if you feel the connection. If you don't, take a second guess. Fix that thing for a week, see if you feel the connection. Process of elimination. But I really believe it's kind of finding the root cause that's going to tell you what the action is to do with your kid.
Yeah, I love that. I was speaking with another guy in the summit here, one of the speakers, and he was saying that so oftentimes we focus on the symptom, but we don't identify the root. So the symptoms come up in other ways, and I wholeheartedly
That's right.
believe that. I want to end it with this. I want to give you the platform. I want to give you 2 to 3 minutes to kind of to roll on our topic of high expectations, building connection, and focused on that. We got a lot of men, like I mentioned, that they want to be better, they just don't know how. Just what kind of close this all up and summarize it for me.
I'll try, folks who want to be better but don't know how, I can't do it for you. Like at the end of the day, you have to make the decision yourself that this is important. And no one's going to do it for you. You can get a coach, you can get support, you can take classes, but we're not in school anymore. Like we are in the real world with real kids who depend on us. So the consequences of our actions are significant. And I'm never the person to sugarcoat parenting for people. I think it's the most important job in the world. I think it's one of the hardest jobs in the world. And I rarely take parents' side on things. Like if it's like, this kid is doing this kid's doing that, this kid's doing that. Like, I understand it's hard. But to me, the most encouraging news I can give you is it's your fault. Like, there's something that you're doing or can do in order to fix that situation. And that is so, so encouraging. Lots of folks shut down and they say, okay, it's me, I'm a failure, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, like, it's just hard. Anything else in life that's hard, we say, okay, let's figure this shit out. Let's work through it. Let's get better. Right? Hard doesn't mean shut down. Hard means keep going. And, when I think about high expectations, I also think about society and like what the standards that are set around us. And as someone who deals largely on social media, mostly with moms, but also with dads, I see this kind of pervasive attitude towards parenting of, this is so hard. This is so hard. This is so hard. So let's quit. Or this is so challenging. So, let's just cut ourselves some slack, or let's just call our best. And it's like, no, like, you can't have high expectations for yourself as a dad and then compare yourself to other people with low expectations and like feel good about the job you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, I have there's a guy named Brendan Burchard who I consider to be like my coach, because I listen to all his work, and he has this quote where he says, most people are B players playing on a C field. thinking they're A players. And I kind of feel like that. I feel like that with myself sometimes. There's times when I look at myself as a dad, I'm like, man, I'm fucking killing it. Like, I'm doing great because I'm doing better than that dad. And I'm like, wait. No, like that wasn't actually my best. I wasn't actually killing it. I was comparing myself to something else to make myself feel better. And I see a lot of that in parenting, a lot of this comparison game. And unless we're comparing ourselves to people we look up to and people who are going to push us, it's not very helpful. So all that is to say, I'll try and put like a nicer bow on it, because that was me kind of saying all the stuff that I keep in my head. Parenting is really, really hard, but there's always something we can do to get better. I think our kids deserve us getting better, and we're not doing them any favors by lowering the bar. It might make us feel better in the moment, but I think deep down inside, we still have this feeling like, okay, like I can do better than that. And once we start to honor that feeling and attempt, not even succeed and win, just attempt to get better, attempt to block out that time or to find that root cause, we're going to see a lot of things shift in a positive direction with our kids. My first year teaching, I mentioned, I struggled with the behavior. It was tough. I mean, I lost 15 pounds in 2 months. I had people at the school next to mine who didn't know me come checking in on my health. I had someone at another school meet with my principal because they're worried about me, because they could see this is what he looked like in August. This is what he looks like in October. I was not sleeping. I was horribly unhealthy, stressed, anxious, depressed. I was going to school every morning wanting to get hit by a truck. I just wanted the car to go off the road. I didn't want to die, but I wanted to be injured bad enough that I never had to teach again. And I get quit without saying I quit, like a dishonorable discharge, maybe injured for like 6 months to a year, like and I had the thought every morning. I sit in my car, I'd cry, didn't want to go in. I have to wipe up my tears, suck it up, get in the room, and then for 9 or 10 hours in a row at my charter school, very long days, like 7 to 4, 7 to 5. I mean, just take losses all day long and have no idea how the fuck I was going to get out of it. No idea. Didn't know how I was going to possibly get better until one day I watched my kids with a PE teacher and I saw her mastery of the class. I saw my kids having fun. I saw them following directions. I saw my kids excelling. And I realized it's not them. This entire time, I'm like, I want to get injured so I don't have to deal with them anymore. Like, it was me. And that realization, that day, literally that day, I went home, I thought about it. Next day I came in, I started watching her class. And I skipped my planning period. And I said, I'm watching her teach my kid to see what she's doing. I started asking her to take her planning period in my room, watch me teach, give me feedback, find out what I'm doing wrong. And I started to turn it around. So when I give this like tough love for people of, we can raise our expectations, we can do better, there's actions we can do. I'm not saying it from like a theoretical space. I'm saying it from like a real space. And if I can do that with 28 kids at once, at 22 years old, with no teaching experience, as a man, a father, a dad with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids, with probably a much stronger relationship already and just a couple places to improve, you can do this too, if you're taking that responsibility and that ownership.
You said something, it's very impactful, and I know I told you that would be my last question, but I'm gonna ask you another one because I think this is important. But I want to validate first that no need to put a bow on that. I do firmly believe as fathers, and I try to do this with myself. Like I bring intention around this. Like I'm getting men to be in alignment and be in the room with me that are smarter than me, and I use that word. And I wholeheartedly mean that, because I'm striving. I'm asking you to speak at this summit. I'm asking other men that I look up to speak at this summit, because at the end of the day, as men, we are the 5 people we hang out with. You just mentioned it, like, being a B player, surrounding yourself with C players, right? I want to be striving for that next, that next milestone, that next level. And I need that positive role model. And that when I do that through that process, everything that you just said, we are showing our kids that as well. And so ties me into this question, because it was beautiful what you said. what started changing in your life? Obviously, you were miserable. I'm sure there was some, your closest relationships were suffering too a little bit. What changed for you, what changed for you in your life when you started to make that decision?
Well, at that point in my life, I was very sad, very down, very low energy. And that's not who I am as a person. My life prior to that was very confident, very successful. And it just so happened that I had always been doing stuff I was good at. You know, I was pretty good at college. I was good at track. I was good at making friends. And now my life wasn't that. It was kids. And I wasn't good at kids. I wasn't good at teaching. And so I think building the skill, feeling myself improve, and seeing the class improved, I started to build my confidence again. I started to feel better about myself because I was feeling very, very down. And I think there's this feedback loop. Like if you look at someone who's trying to lose weight, you get incredible motivation when you start to see pounds go off the scale. You don't have to be at your dream weight, but once you start to see the pounds go off and you see the progress, there's momentum. There's movement in the right direction. And for me, coming in every day and starting to see that momentum, I know, okay, I'm still not the teacher I want to be, but like I can do this. It's feasible. And so there's a little bit of that kind of juice and energy towards school and towards my job. But health improved. I put some weight back on. My sleep got better, quality of life better, relationships. I mean, it's all tied together. I don't think that you can be in charge of children and be the one kind of responsible for a little precious child's development, be doing like a shitty job, and then go home and like, knock everything else out of the park. Like that sits with you, whether it's teaching or parenting. I think that we have to feel like we're kind of walking in alignment with our purpose. And if a large part of our purpose is those kids, it's kind of hard for everything else to stack up when we're struggling with those kids. So it was incredibly helpful for me. I did not finish the year in like a perfect place. I was still a young year one teacher. I took a lot of those lessons towards parenting and understanding that if I front load as much as possible my time and energy with him, which is why I quit teaching. If I can front load and spend as much time and energy as possible building the relationship early and pouring in him early, that I'm going to see all of that return on the back end, and it's not going to be as hard. It's the same reason every teacher spends the first 2 to 4 weeks of a school year building class culture and setting up routines and procedures. They know that those 2 to 4 weeks are the most important ones of the school year. So they set it up, they build, they invest, they pour everything in, and then they work to kind of build on and kind of maintain that over the course of the year. I looked at it with my son that same way, and I say, you know what, from my team teaching, I know how important this stuff is. I know the role that I play. I know if I see the behavior, there's something I can do. Let me just, as much as I can, pour in to kind of help myself down the line.
Yeah, I really love that. And like what comes for me, like as I was listening to your story, it reminds me of like my own fatherhood journey, but also like the men that I work with. I hear so many times like everybody wants the prize, no one wants the process, right? But when you look
Yep.
at fatherhood, like the process of fatherhood, the process of um, diving into the triggers that we're being triggered by our kids and creating the connection, that is the prize, right? And so like embracing that whole journey, creating that deeper connection, and within turn, this whole process, you start to have higher expectations for yourself, right? And that's one thing that just listening to what you said, and then this is my last question, I promise, and then I'll ask you for how men can work with you or how they can get in contact with you. I know you're not a men's coach, but you were somewhat in your field, right? Like I'm gonna say somewhat, because like we're searching for our purpose. You were in the ballpark, right? Some people are like right field, some people are in left
Yep.
field. Like you were there. When you made that transition to you're like, hey, I'm in my purpose, I got the passion. Like, how did this self-confidence, how did this trust within yourself form? Like what started it? What did you start to notice about yourself?
Are you asking about when I was teaching, or kind
So
of when I
so
transitioned into this current role?
transitioning into this current role.
And you're asking, can you ask the question again?
So obviously you wanted to work with kids. Initially you had some challenges. You just mentioned about building trust and confidence within yourself, because we're going back to real quick the high expectations that we're talking about, creating connection, believing in ourselves, following your passion, following your purpose. You found it. You found alignment. You're going full steam ahead. You're seeing this explosion. You're creating connection with kids. You're impacting generations to come. What are you seeing internally? What's happening for you throughout this whole process?
Got it. I'll be really honest with this question. The work that I do now, starting a business, being responsible not just for my income, my family's income, other families and their income, other people and their kids, entering an arena like I am in alignment with my passion and my purpose, but that doesn't mean that I have all the skills needed to do it. I've had to gain so many skills still in the process. I mean, I'm learning so much that when I tell people about this journey, I talk about what it takes out of you and what it brings up. And I think it takes everything in terms of like energy and discipline and focus and skill building. And for me and for other entrepreneurs I know, like it brings up your biggest insecurities. It brings up the things in life that you're worst at. It brings up the stuff that you've buried down. And it's been brutal in a lot of ways. And at the same time, having something that you're kind of fighting and working that hard for is very special. There is an incredible reward on the other end of what I do when I get messages from people about the impact, or when I'm able to come up with like a better and simpler way to teach something to help someone, or when I'm able to support other folks and other employees or support my family, or like there's so much return that you get when you are fully invested and investing. And when those things come up, for me, I've been in several situations where money's really tight. And it's like if you've never been in that situation where, you know, your ability to keep your house and your cars and your son's school depends on the next 7 days of what income you're able to generate, like you may not get it. Like that's a pretty stressful position. But working through that, getting to the other side of that is incredible. It's been amazing. And you bring up these insecurities and these challenges, and then you learn how to overcome them. So the next time when life brings up those things, you know how to handle it. And I've done a lot of this kind of entrepreneurial journey, kind of thinking through my son's eyes in terms of what he's learning and what he's seeing about his dad. And I'm not perfect at this, but I want him to grow up seeing you can have a dream, you can have something that you're passionate about. Hopefully it helps people. I would love that. I'm big on actually helping people. Hopefully he does something in the world that like changes people's lives and helps them out. And you can have hardships and obstacles, which are going to come up no matter what you do. And you can overcome them and keep doing what you do to create something in the world that wasn't there before. So I don't think that's the actual answer to your question, but I've been thinking about it so much, because everything from my self-talk, and kind of internal things, all the way to things like graphic design and these really tangible tasks, email marketing. I've had to learn and build all of those skills in order to kind of keep marching in the direction of what I think it is that I'm supposed to do.
I think that's, that's beautifully said, because at the end of the day, like one thing that I've told my son so many times is like, I think success, I break down success not as in like the material, not about the money, not about the cars, not about the, we used to own a restaurant, like I was in the Navy, like not all of that, but our ability as people, specifically me, like our ability as fathers to peel the layers back, right? To peel what my father conditioned me, how my mother conditioned me, to really see how I show up in the world. And because at the end of the day, like we have this opportunity to be a platform for our children. We get to be a leader. We get to be someone that inspires our children, and we give our kids opportunities, right? And so like that's just so beautifully well said. I want to close with this. Obviously, I know that you work majorly with women and toddlers, but if there's a man out there that's like really intrigued by your message, how can he get in touch, or how can he work with you? What do you have that men can reach out for?
They can shoot me a DM on Instagram or feel free to email. I get a lot of different messages and questions for a lot of different stuff. People who want to teach their kids to read, people want to learn how to speak English, people want help with business coaching, people have parenting questions. And I'm not able to answer and handle everything, but when I hear parents who want to get better at what they're doing with their kids, at their relationship, at how they treat them, at how they talk to them, respond to different things. I've got a couple of videos on my YouTube page about behavior where I kind of break down, here's exactly how to hold your body, and here's how to position your eyes, and here's the tone of voice to use, and here's the way that you actually start to build momentum towards having a kid follow your directions and engage with you. I love supporting folks with those kinds of things. So shoot me a message, shoot me an email. Happy to talk more. I'm not going to claim expertise in, being a dad or fatherhood, but if people have questions about, how to kind of maintain high expectations for kids, or how to help kids with behavioral expectations, how to start to build in these really concrete blocks during the day to support some relationship building and some skill building with the kid. Those are all things that I have kind of done as a teacher and as a dad that I feel confident speaking on.
Thank you so much, Spencer. I really truly do appreciate your time today. I look forward to the next time. I look forward to the work that you put out, and just want to say thank you again.
Cool. Thank you so much.